Hello students, today's agenda is to check homework. We'll be learning about the standard form and you will be able to do 4.8. Today students will be able to create equations in standard form from scenarios and explain the intercepts and state constraints. And from the previous lessons we learned that the x-intercept is the point where the curve intersects the x-axis, and it can be a curve or a line. The y-intercept is the point where the curve intersects the y-axis. And so in here it says, set up the equation, graph, and explain the intercepts. Price problems. Number 1 says, Franklin spent $500. He bought $20 books and $50 discs. How many of each might he have bought? First, we're going to write an equation. For the books, we can either use x, and for the discs, we can use y. Or the other option that we can do is to use the initial for each one. So it would be 20b plus 50d will be equals to the $500 that Franklin spent. Then it says to graph. However, when we're graphing an equation that is in standard form, what is standard form? In standard form, that means that the two variables are before the equal sign, and they call it ax plus by equals c, where a, b, and c are just numbers, okay, or integers. Okay, that's when it's in standard form with both x and y, or the two variables are on the left of the equal sign. Okay, so to be able to find the intercepts, what you're going to do is that you're going to label BD in here, or XY if you have use the X and the Y. So BD. And to find the value of B, D will be 0. And so if you had to show your work, if you don't have to show your work, all you have to do is like, oh, if D is 0, 0 times 50 is 0. So that disappears, and we just divide 500 divided by 20 gives me 25. And you'll find that. If you're not sure, you use your calculator. 500 divided by 20 equals 25. Then when B is 0, 20 times 0 is 0. So 500 divided by 50 equals 10. And that's all you have to do to get the x and y intercepts. So 500 divided by the cost of one disc gives you 10 discs. And so those are your x and y intercepts. And what we will do in here is that we can do by 5s. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and that's as far as I need. Okay, for the other one, I will do 5, 10, and that's as far as I need. I'll just do a couple more, 25. And so this over here is the B, which represents the number of books. Here is the number of discs. And so 25-0 means that when you buy 25 books, you cannot buy any discs because you spent all the money. And when you buy 0 books, then you are able to buy 10 discs because they're more expensive. We graph, and then it says explain the intercepts. So for the first intercept, which is 25-0, it means that when you buy 25 books, you will buy 0 discs. And for the other intercept, which is 0-10, it means when you buy 10 discs, you buy 0 books. In our graph, you can see that I continued my line. However, can we have since this represents books, can we have -5 books or -10 books? No, so that's when we talk about constraints. X is the domain. The values of X are my domain. And with $500, you will not be able to buy more than 25 books because you'll go over the $500. And you cannot have negative value for books. So my domain will be X is greater or equal than 0, but is less or equal than the 25 books that I'm going to be able to buy. For the range, okay, the same thing. The range in this case is the number of discs that I can buy. So my Y will be greater or equal than 0, the same thing. You cannot have negative discs, but the maximum number of discs that I can buy is 10. So it's going to be Y is less or equal than 10. So it's between 0 and 10. That's what it means. Again, the domain refers to possible numbers for X. The range is the possible numbers for Y. And that's how you say it. X is greater or equal than 0, but less or equal than 25. And Y is greater or equal than 0, but less or equal than 10. And yes, this looks the same and we read it different because we are referring to Y. Y is greater. It is the greater. Number 2 says, Andres has 40 pounds of clay. He can make vases with 2 pounds and statues with 4 pounds. Okay, but for a total of 40. How many of each can he make if he uses all his clay? That's why this is an equation and not an inequality, because he's using all of his clays, and in the previous he spent exactly 500. Okay, so it's when it's exactly that you have an equal sign, and that's why these are equations and not inequalities. Okay, write the equation. So it says that with 2 pounds he can make vases. With 4 pounds he can make statues, and it's equals to the 40 pounds. Again, it's in standard form because the V and the S are on the left side of the equal sign. And that's when it's easier to use the intercepts, right? To be able to graph. So we put the 0, 0. In this case, we're going to put V and S, V and S. What you do is, if you're not, like if S is 0, all you have to say, oh, 4 times 0 is 0, so that's basically not there. And all you have to do is divide 40 divided by 2 is 20. And now when V is 0, 2 times 0 is 0, so that's why that disappears. 40 divided by 4 is 10. But if you have to show your work, which I should have showed you in the previous example as well, what you do is, okay, I didn't have this, S is 0, so I just put 2V plus 4 times 0, because the value of S is 0, equals 40. Now, one thing that you should know is that for the V-intercept or X-intercept, the opposite is always 0. Okay, it's always the opposite that is 0. 4 times 0 is 0. 2V equals, so I'm just bringing everything down. 2V plus 0 is 2V equals 40. If you're multiplying, the opposite is to divide. And so V equals 40 divided by 2 is 20, which is this number I got here. Now, when you're trying to find S, because we didn't have S, V was 0. The opposite was 0, right? So 2 times 0, and I divided. Why is that? Again, 2 times 0 plus 4S equals 40. 2 times 0 is 0. That's why it disappeared. Plus 4S equals 40. 0 plus anything is just the other number, or in this case term, equals 40. And now if we're multiplying, the opposite is to divide. And so S equals 40 divided by 4 is 10, which is that number right there. And now we're ready to graph. I'll just do it by 5 so that it's a little bit more spread. So 5, 10, 15, 20. Even though I could just do 10, 20, and then 10. Okay, but that's okay. 5, 10, 15, 20. And so we put on the X the value that is represented by this. In this case is vases, so we're going to put vases in here, the number of vases, and in here is the number of statues. Okay, so when I have 20 vases, it's right here. I have 0 statues. And when I have 0 vases, I have 10 statues. I connected 2 points. But let's see if that makes sense, okay, in a minute, once we come to constraints. First, let's explain the intercept, which is what we found in here. And so explain the intercepts. 20, 0, what does that represent? It represents that when I make, or when Andres makes 20 vases, he cannot make any statues. So when Andres makes 20 vases, he makes 0 statues. And the other is 0, 10. When Andres makes 10 statues, he makes 0 vases. Okay, sorry about that. And you can also write when Andres makes 0 vases, he makes 10 statues. If you want to switch these ones, that's fine. To make this one, to write about this one first and then this second, it's up to you. Okay, state the constraints again. The domain is the possible values for X. So if it makes it easier for you, you can just write those first. And we know that we cannot have negative vases. So the smallest is 0. And the biggest is 20. Why? Because you cannot make more than 20 if you only have 40 pounds of clay. The range, possible values for Y. So Y is greater or equal than 0 again, because we cannot have negative statues. But is less or equal than 10, because we cannot make more than 10 since we only have 40 pounds of clay and it takes 4 pounds for each one of those statues. If you can please support the channel by giving us a thumbs up, subscribing around here. This is the link to the entire unit, and here is the next lesson. Now you're able to do 4.8 and have fun.